Sanbonani, Molweni, greetings to our comrades, families, colleagues, to all our friends who are currently watching this live stream, and our friends who will be watching in future. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mwelela Cele. I'm the researcher for Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, based in the Africa Region's Johannesburg office. I'm also the co-director of public programs at the Forge, also here in Braamfontein, Johannesburg. I greet and welcome you on behalf of Tricontinental and the Forge. Today we are launching Tricontinental Dossier number 44, which focuses on Black community programs. The title of the dossier is Black Community Programs, the Practical Manifestation of Black Consciousness Philosophy. We are at the Commune Bookshop in Braamfontein, a Pan-African radical bookshop. Back in the 1970s, Black community programs, the very same organization that we are exploring today, had an office in number 8 Jorrison Street, here in Braamfontein, not very far from where we are. So in a sense, it is an act of homage that today we are launching this dossier within walking distance of the site where the offices of Black community programs in Johannesburg were located all those years ago. Babu Pogwe Mafuna, a Black consciousness stalwart, actually worked in that very office. To help us launch this dossier, we are privileged to have here with us our mothers, Black consciousness stalwarts, who were there in those days working for Black community programs and loyal members of the Black consciousness movement. We have Mam Thoko Mpumlwana. Sawona ma? And we have Mam Asha Moodley. Greetings, ma. Yep. They were at the forefront of it all there when it happened. Today, they will take us back to the late 60s and 70s, the Black consciousness era. Then tomorrow, September 25, is the 47th anniversary of the Viva Frelimo rally, an iconic event that was organized by the Black consciousness movement. I want to thank them before we begin. I'm going to thank them by quoting a few deeply significant words written by my favorite dramatist and poet, Ubabu H.I. Idlom. When he was congratulating the poet, Dr. P.W. Vilakazi, these words sum up so fully the work of our mothers who are with us here today. And all those great stalwarts who work, and all those great stalwarts whose work we honor today. Ubabu H.I. Idlom, when he was congratulating P.W. Vilakazi, he said, your efforts are your people's fame. So today we are saying that to Oma and other Black consciousness stalwarts, we are saying your efforts are your people's fame. Imzamo yenu iyudumo labantu bakini. Siyabonga kakhulu. May we begin. So the first question is for both of you, but I'll start with you, Mam Thoko. Please tell us a little about your personal history and what led to your interest in the Black consciousness movement. What were the actual steps that led to your involvement in the Black consciousness movement?
First, I would like to congratulate your organization for this wonderful, wonderful work. I really am so nostalgic. Thank you, thank you. My name is Thoko Mpumlwana, and my journey was, I think things just happen in your life without you planning. I came from a family of activists. My mother and my father were people who were in their own way in the church, but as children would hear issues of justice being discussed. However, it never made, I was a child. And then by some strange coincidence, I went to a school called Inanda Seminary. On this one particular day, we had a play by a group called Tekon. She knows better than me how it was formed. But that group called Tekon came to stage a play with poetry on Black consciousness, on the struggle, on the role of students, without telling us what we should do. We knew exactly after they'd gone what we had to do. And that was when the light was, I remember Strini was there, I think Sets was there, I think you, I'm not sure if you were there. I know there were about 5 people in that play. And they were going to have a play over the weekend in Beatrice Street, somewhere around Beatrice Street, which is also quoted in the document. And I want to confess publicly that I dodged school that afternoon. It was a boarding school, and off we went with a friend of mine to go and watch the play, and so the journey began. After that, of course, I passed matric and I went to Forte, and that's when serious activism started with SASO, and the rest is history. I think we will talk more about it as time goes on.
So it happened at Forte?
At Forte, yes. I went to Forte University.
And what year was this?
It was 1972 when I went to Forte.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I want to echo Togo's congratulations. This is wonderful. I think in a way it's a 21st century version of the Black Community Programs.
Absolutely.
Library in King Williamstown.
Yeah.
All chrome and glass. Lovely.
Yeah.
But the books are there, and I think that's what we were all about, learning from each other and also encouraging a culture of learning. I just want to remind Togo that when they left school without permission, that was the end of Tekon's relationship with the Inanda Seminary. They wouldn't allow us there again because they saw the theater group as subversive, if we could encourage students to duck school. Yeah, but to everyone listening, my name is Ashu Moodley. You know, I think there have been lots of random events in my life which took me to a lot of wonderful places. I was a student at the University College for Indians on Salisbury Island. And I think that's where my political education began. Prior to that, I was at a girls' school in Pietermaritzburg, and I think, you know, there were wars amongst girls, depending on which religion you came from. Some religions were, if you belonged to the Christian faith, you were seen as more civilized. Basically, I was always challenging religions, so you can imagine. But it was, you know, I think I had a vague sense of unease about a lot of things, very confused. When I went to Salisbury Island, I came into contact with students from the then Transvaal, and they used to have a lot of political discussions, and I think I learned from them. And then later I met Strini and the many students who were doing speech and drama, and you know, Strini in particular was very creative, so he used drama. There were events planned by the authorities to celebrate Republic Day, but what he did and the others planned a series of sketches with were statements on racism of the time and the treatment of black students everywhere. So our first show was called Black on White, and I think we took it to places like the Inanda Seminary, we took it to Fort Hare. We were known as the Clan, and from the Clan, we eventually developed into Tekon because there was a lot of cultural activity in Durban. There were any number of theatre groups which spoke, it was very political theatre. It's quite a long story because, you know, that history too has to be captured about culture, the theatre and the arts playing a conscientizing role. We actually formed the South African Black Theatre Union. Very few people know about that. We had 2 national theatre festivals. I know John Kanye and Winston Inshona came down there as the Serpent Players, together with the rest of the cast. But I think they forgot that. So, yeah, I think by joining the group, I entered the Black consciousness movement. It was, I suppose, a natural thing because it crystallized a lot for us. And Steve had heard about TechOn, and there was some conference or the other going on at the university campus in Wentworth, and we were invited, and the rest is history. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Maybe before we get to Black community programs, I'm just going to ask maybe 2 questions before I ask maybe questions connected to Black community programs. Maybe this question is for you, Ma'am Ash. Can you please take us back to the late 60s and 70s and briefly describe the political climate in South Africa at that time, with particular reference to political repression?
Yeah, I think if one reads our history, we will realize that the 60s was a period of deep repression in South Africa. I think the treason trial had taken place. The leaders of the ANC had been sent to prison. And of course, the imprisonment, etc., was a kind of warning to Black people as to what would happen to them if they engaged in political activism. The nationalist government of the time passed a whole lot of repressive laws, detention laws. I think both Togo and I wrote about those very repressive laws. There were bannings, there were indefinite detentions of people for 90 days, 180 days. Some people were forgotten and were detained for over 180 days. And then we know that there were deaths in detention, you know, from people like Chimal, our own comrade Mapeshla Mohapi, and of course Steve's murder during detention, but coming down later. Just to get back, it was a period of deep repression and fear. I think there was a lot of fear in the Black community about engaging in political action because of the consequences, you know, because of the fact that you could just be taken off and detained in some unknown place without access to a lawyer, without your family knowing where you are, and then the next thing, they might hear that you accidentally died in detention or you committed suicide in detention, and that kind of stuff. So I suppose I'm mentioning this because I think it took a great amount of determination and courage to actually say, well, despite all this, we are going to challenge this very oppressive, racist system. And
would you like to add something?
Yes, I would like to just add that that period, the role of young people in that period reminds me of the Fees Must Fall period, that bravery that you cannot explain in the midst of confusion. And just to give an example, that was the time in the 60s and 70s when apartheid system was serious about homelands, very serious about separating people on racial. They were determined at that point that we will succeed, having banned the other organizations. also in education, very, very serious. I remember at my school, they didn't have Afrikaans. We did Afrikaans for the first time in grade 9, standard 7. Forced it, and some schools had to close as a result of that. So for young people to raise their voices at that point, it can only be some intervention of strength and solidarity that, but also I think the influence of black people in the diaspora also gave us strength to know that we're not alone. Hence black solidarity, because that meant this struggle we are waging is a just struggle that everybody sees is worth fighting for.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe this question is for you, Ma'am Thoko. Explain black consciousness as an attitude of mind, a way of life. Also discuss the use of the term black as opposed to non-white.
It's very easy for, the black consciousness is a concept that really at that time was very, very, and is still relevant today. Imagine a context where every day you are told you are not worth it. Every day you are put in a corner. You are a minor. Let me give an example. If you are a child and you have a parent you respect, and that parent is in front of you is not treated with respect, it leaves something in you, some anger. So, black consciousness was saying to black people, refuse to be made to feel inferior. It is possible for you to change the destiny of black people. And by black people at the time, was meant Asha, was meant Thoko, was meant colored people, and black people in the diaspora. It even meant that we are Africans, all of us, we belong. So it was a concept that did not classify us. It was the oppression that we were experiencing that brought us together as humans ready to fight the struggle for a just society for all. That was what black consciousness was all about and continues to be. To say, be proud of who you are. The future is in your hand. No one should dictate who you are. Non-whites, if you remember, were regarded as those people who did not see anything wrong with the system, participated in the system. But at that time, everything was defined as white. And therefore, everything good is white. Everything progressive is white. Everything black. If you are black, you are a non-white. Literally, legally, that's how we, which is why we insisted we're not non-something, we are black.
Thank you. Before now we go to black community programs, can you also, because I'm going to ask a question about the inspiration behind black community programs, but I want to also ask a question about the type of literature that you were reading in those days. What type of books? Because I'm here, this question, in fact, I'm asking this question because I'm remembering some of the conversations that I used to have with Vino, Ma'am Vino in Durban, Vino Reddy, where she was telling me about Silar James, Fanon, the literature that you were reading in those days. But I will also, for the younger generation and other people who are watching and future generations, I want to know from you what type of books inspired you, what literature, was assisting you in developing the black consciousness philosophy.
Well, I think Frantz Fanon was de rigueur. Right? You read Frantz Fanon, even if you didn't understand
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
But you got the gist of it. And, well, I think with our poetry programs, we read a lot of poetry from the poets of Africa, and, you know, really that was something new. Because in our schools, we were taught white poetry. And to discover poetry by black people was such a wonderful thing. It was something that I took to my students and, you know, told them you could write your own poetry. It was also a discovery for students to discover that black people could actually write, you know, because this kind of writing ability, producing books was always associated with white people. It was certainly not considered the realm of black people. And then there were the newsletters. The SASO newsletters, I think, were waited for very eagerly by all students. I can't really remember many of the books then, but, because a lot of time has passed. I do know that we used to go to a bookshop, the Premier Bookshop, and Shane, the poor guy there, used to be told, please order these books. A lot of them were banned books, but he would somehow get them. And then I think once after several of our homes had been raided and books had been found, they discovered that the bookshop in question was the Premier Bookshop, and they raided that bookshop. And yeah, that comrade there had some words with us. So we're reading a lot of writers from Africa. We're also reading a lot of writings by people in the US, writings by the Black Panthers and so on, and their poetry as well. And there was a lot that gelled with what we were reading and what soon after became a kind of writing culture within the Black consciousness movement, because it did generate a lot of writing. A lot of poetry was produced. We had people like James Matthews, we had Elva McKay, we had a whole range of women poets. So yes, we were reading in a very, I can't say disciplined manner, but you know, all that reading and discovery through reading was very exciting indeed. Today I'm actually reading, these days, a book written by Mwelela called Repossessing the Land, which is about climate change and the need for action against environmental degradation, etc. So for me that was very interesting, because I think in the old days I suppose we might have mentioned the environment, but not to the extent that we spoke about racism and psychological oppression because of racism and so on. I'm not sure if I've asked you.
You've answered very well. Yeah. Do you want to add, Ma?
Yes, you were saying that last week you had a Zoom on Paulo Freire.
On Paulo Freire, yes. Yep.
It was one of our
Yes.
inspiration
Yes.
writers on education, on consciousness, on how people are socialized, and we use that to assist us with education programs that we were running. I think Debsma Choba was one of those who was very key in our literacy program. There is also another book that was very popular by Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart. It was one of those books that if you had not read that book,
Yes.
you were not there yet.
Yes.
Of course, the Frantz Fanon, but
Yes.
in the novels, those were some of the books.
Sure.
But we're also just inspired by, as she says, poetry, a lot of poetry that was read there. And I must say that, as Asha says, the Black Panther movement also assisted in our thinking and helped us to radicalize our thinking in terms of where we want to go as Black consciousness people, including the clothing that we were studying. We had afros. Angela Davis was one of those women who were,
Sure.
that's her, that's us.
Sure. Thank you for mentioning Paulo Freire, because yes, last week we launched another Tricontinental Dossier on Paulo Freire. Also this year it's the centenary of the birth of Paulo Freire. So in fact, now that we're talking about Paulo Freire, maybe this is good for us to go to Black community programs. Tell us exactly, what was the inspiration behind the founding of Black community programs? How were they developed? How did they start? How did you form Black community programs? I'll start with you, Ma, and then move to you.
The Black consciousness was a philosophy that says you can do it. Occupy all spaces. As Black people, if you are in sport, be excellent in sport. And conscientize people through the platform that you occupy. That is why you'll have the arts, you'll have theology programs, you'll have sport bodies, you have the media, and so on. Black community program was an effort to say, you can take control of your destiny. They will not tell you how. White people think you don't know development. We will show how to build our own communities, to get our people in charge of their own destiny. But also it was a platform for conscientizing people about the struggle. And so when it was founded along those areas for special projects in health, in development, in research, in writing, and I think it was mainly around those areas, and in various parts of the country. And the intention was to massify it, but also to try a model that ensures that as Black people we develop theories around how to turn around thinking, the consciousness of people, development, and how to mobilize people for social change and justice.
Thank you very much. Ma'am Asha, can you, while you respond to the same question, can you also mention the leadership training programs? How we were doing those?
Okay, but just to add to what Chodo has said, I think with consciousness, you just, once you're conscious of what's happened to you, and you're conscious of injustice and oppression, then you are moved to action. And what consciousness does is make you aware of what has been taken away from you. The idea that you are Black and therefore you lack skills, you cannot think for yourself, you can't develop things for yourself. That was the result of white racism, and it was clearly the program of the Nationalist Party. But Black community programs, I think, was also a very practical way of working with the Black community, who anyway might have told you this, that you can be self-reliant in very practical ways. If you think of the basic agricultural program where people were taken through, having food gardens, using the kind of growing material that would give you good crops, to be self-reliant, because the idea was that you had to rely on the produce from a white supermarket or something. So it was, I think, that kind of discovery, that you have the ability to sit and to think about ways to bring yourself up and to survive on your own terms. And if you look at today, at what's happening, these ideas are still valid, because we're living in a time of climate change and all kinds of other oppressions. And I think there are programs going on where people are told, but actually we can, start thinking about how we attain, we safeguard our food sovereignty. We work on how we can achieve food security. We can do this, and I think it works, as Thoko said, people get together and work as a community. So I think that was the value, the kind of thinking behind the formation of Black community programs, very practical ways in which the Black community, which had been told it was worthless and couldn't think, was told by Black consciousness, but actually you can do it. You can be self-reliant, your ideas are valid. And I think in an increasingly capitalist world, that message must come out again and be put across. We've got to tackle the system of oppression out there. To come to the second part of your question.
Leadership training?
Yeah,
Yes.
leadership training was a part and parcel of the Black consciousness movement. I think it took place through SASO. SASO had some wonderful, what it called formation schools. We'd drive late at night from Durban through the Eastern Cape, and sometimes on the way, shame, maybe a donkey or a horse might get knocked down. We'd all be fast asleep, and then suddenly you hear this bang, and yeah. But we used to travel, I'm not sure where, and you'd sit there for a week, and we'd have our tutors, our mentors taking us through a whole course, political education, practical things like what the Black community programs did. And I think when I was in King Williamstown, there were some of those meetings with the youth. Today, there's the Mtapo Center, who has done wonderful work. In fact, Mtapo Center, in a sense, has replicated the work that the Black community programs used to do before it was banned. It has worked with the youth. It has worked with young children, developing their leadership skills. And I think that strong message is one of affirmation, no matter what your age, no matter what you've been told about yourself at school, you can do it. But the leadership school focuses on working as a group, first sort of discovering who you are, and then working with the rest of the group in resolving problems. That was the basic idea, I think, behind the Black community program. And I think, we must thank Ben Kwapa, because we all talk about Steve, everybody else, and of course they were valuable, but Ben was always there. He was the bulwark. He was a sort of, he was there in the back, and I think Steve and everybody else knew that they could go to him.
Let me just share one advantage of these formation schools.
Yes.
And I don't think it was intentional, but it happened that way. With these training programs, it enabled us to know what is going on, so that if this layer is arrested, the next layer just takes over, fits in, and this is what used to annoy the police, because they ban and arrest people. Even when Steve was banned, they thought, Leopold Street continued, because the next people knew exactly what they had to do. Then that layer was arrested. Then the next layer still took over until they had to ban the organizations, because they realized that this method doesn't work because of the type of empowerment leadership development that was there. Everyone felt, I am a leader, I have to be ready to take over, whatever happens.
I think we need leadership training today in our current times. And now that you are also talking about Uba Ben and we are talking about, you know, the offices. We've mentioned King Williamstown, and by mentioning Uba Ben, we are making me think of the Durban office in 86 Beatrice Street and the office in Umlazi. Maybe can we talk about maybe the key people in different offices, because there was the office in 86 Beatrice Street, the office in 15 Leopold Street in King Williamstown, the office here in 80 Jorrison Street, and then the office in Umlazi. Maybe, I'll start with you. Maybe if you can maybe talk about, because I believe I know that you worked in the King Williamstown office, but you also worked in the Durban office briefly.
Well, part-time.
Part-time. Can you?
But I do know.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe you can maybe tell me, start me off with the King Williamstown, the Durban office.
Yeah, in the Durban office, I think
some of the key people at the very beginning, the head office at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think Ben was the director, and his able right-hand person was a woman, very strong woman, Hester Joseph. You know, Ben was always in demand, and Hester used to manage his diary very well. But she also came to know all the BC activists, and so she was very useful in many ways when the office was under surveillance, etc. Then there was Sam Moodley, who actually was doing research, and when she was banned, I think also in your case, I was asked to come in and do that work, and that's how I got in to the Black Community Programs Research Department, where I worked with Daphne Koza, who was also doing research. And then we worked with the late Pascal Mafiki Gwala, a great poet and writer. Yeah, but for me, those were the key Black Community Programs people in Durban. I think I'm not going to talk so much about King Williamstown because Togo will do that. Steve was there, but after his banning, he moved to. He had to move to King Williamstown.
Maybe, Ma'am Togo, you can tell us about the King Williamstown office. Maybe while you tell us about the King Williamstown office, you can also mention some of the people that were at the Njwaka Leatherwork Factory. Yes. The people at the office at the Njwaka Leatherwork Factory.
Yes. The Leopold Street office had SASO as well there. And so there we had Mapeta Mohapi, I think, at some point, and then we had Sokupa, can't remember who else. There was Nohle Mohapi at the Black Community Program. They were all. Then we also had, okay, let me start at Leopold Street. Then we had Malusi Mpumlwana, who became my husband and my partner. And then we had Nobandile Mvovo, who also came to join us. And at Njwaka, the person responsible for Njwaka was Mkolisi Mvovo. And then we had Tiny, who is now Tiny Mwelela, and who was also there. They used to make leather bags, and they also conscientized through the clothing that was being made, the African clothing, to make people proud of who they are and sell it. And at a time when it was not fashionable to put on, in fact, it was looked down upon to wear African clothing. And then you also, so you had Tiny, and then you had a short stint of Thoko Mpumlwana there as well. I remember she came for a short stint to work at Njwaka. And whilst I hope I can remember everyone who was there, then there was also Zimele Trust Fund, which was also part of that work around the community program. And you had Magida, and you had his wife, and then we had Mbilini, and then Mampila was at Zinyoka. They started the clinic, Zanempilo Clinic. There was Siolo Solombela there. There was Moletsane there. There was Mrs. Moletsane, the nurse, and Moletsane, the doctor, who also had a stint there at Zanempilo. Those are some I remember. And then the ones we were talking about just before we start, Zimkita. Peter Jones was in was in
Williamstown.
Oh, was in King Williamstown, yes, because I know at some point he went to Cape Town, to work in Cape Town.
People were very itinerant.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Like Ben Langa was in Durban.
Ben Langa was in
Ben
Durban.
is
Okay. Yes. And Tomega was here, was in Durban and here in
And
Johnson
here,
Street
yes.
with Babu
Mafu.
Okay. 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 So no. Okay. Then now that we have some of the comrades, the key comrades, can you also tell us? Okay, I just want us to start with the research and publications, like maybe the Black Review, and then we'll move again back to Zanempilo. You know, what was it about? You know, can you maybe Mam Asha? Okay, this question is for both of you. Can you tell us about the Black Review? I mean, the editorial process there. I mean, how did you decide which article? Which article to write, which research to do? I mean, what was the editorial process? Did you have editorial meetings to sit down? I know it was a difficult time. I'm sure it was difficult to sit down and just say, okay, we're deciding, you know. But can you tell us the process? Because, it's a classic. I mean, the work there. I mean, how did you decide on the work and the research?
I can relate to that. You know that the motivation behind the publications was that Black people should be writing about themselves, talking about the things they considered important, because there were other people like the Institute of Race Relations writing about Black people in a manner that didn't entirely satisfy many of us. So I think, if I think of it, I think there was a committee and there were meetings, and I'm thinking about King Williamstown for the Black Review. You were saying, do we stick to, you know, the same format? Is there anything new that we had to add? But we looked at what was happening in the Black community, and I remember in 73, when I assisted with that Black Review, we looked at, in a way, we always were looking back at what had happened in the past year. So there had been many detentions and bannings. There was lots of political activity by various kind of organizations like colored people's. Well, some of them were part of the governments, but we looked at them and what they were saying. We looked at the homeless system. We also looked at what was happening in the arts section and various sporting codes. So I remember that very clearly. And of course, we couldn't cover everything, but certainly the most bannings and detentions around that period was would have been an obvious thing to write on, because it was really when sending shockwaves through the Black community, and we felt that we had to be thoughtful about it. Our own way, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Would you like to add more?
Yes, I would like to say that at that time, the person responsible for research and publication was Malusi. So we had Black Review, but also Black Perspective, Black this, Black that, Black that. And then there was also the work on media. And Tenji was in that space, joined that space of the media, working for Daily Dispatch deliberately in order to feed in the, information as well on what Black people are doing there. But Tenji was also involved in the work with people who are detained and also in projects, Tenji Mtinso. So Black Review would be that we dependent on books published that particular year, if there were any, review those. That's why I say it was really a Black solidarity thing, because the journalists who were, especially the Rand Daily Mail, in Durban, you know, there were journalists you knew would cover pivotal issues around what is happening in the Black community, and those would also assist in enhancing the information, the data that we were collecting. But we also did interviews. Literally, we went to talk to people, interview them on the information we get. Some would agree, others wouldn't agree. I mean, but would have would have really research as in research, have various sources of information before writing.
Okay. I can add to that. I think there used to be those initial meetings where the contents would be decided, and then you would choose who would be writing particular chapters. But I remember in the Durban office sitting with sets of papers that, you know, Mercury, etc., and then I would cut out articles relating to specific chapters, and then I would paste them on A4 sheets, and these were filed away under subject headings. So for your research, you drew upon a lot of material produced by the press, all kinds of press. The so-called black press was small, but it said some very powerful things too. So that was part of it. And then if you wanted further information, I remember writing about the NIC, then I would had to go and interview someone from the NIC to add to that. So that was the part of the writing process. And then I remember writing my chapters in longhand,
Yes.
and
Those
giving
days
them to,
there were no computers.
and that's why I say Hester was really a star, because she was the one who typed it all up.
Yeah.
And then I suppose it went to, you know, whoever was.
Can I share a joke of my first attempt at writing? Just been expelled from Forte, so I mean, I was doing English and I thought I had it all, and so I write the first thing I'm asked to write. I can't even remember what I was writing about. So I've written, and I'm very proud of it, and I gave it to Steve at the time. I think Malusi wasn't there to edit. Sure. Came back and said, "Tasari, write this thing. Does not make sense." Was I upset? How can they tell me I can't write? But you know, in a way that's empowering. It's not as if I felt small. So it became, we learned from each other in an amazing way, because I could really say I learned to write there through these interactions. And so whatever I wrote, she'd read, whatever she wrote, somebody else would read, just to enhance it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. I remember once when Steve had read the section on NIC. Now, the NIC wasn't very popular among some of us. And I suppose Mafika and I had been selected. But yeah, this is where I found this very interesting from Steve. He said, "Where did you get this? Are you guys pushing your own ideas here? I mean, I want to see where this came from." And, I thought that was great. I mean, asking for a kind of objectivity and some kind of authority to show that what you'd written there was, you know, wasn't coming from somewhere else. So we had to produce the cutting and say, this is where it came from. But he says, remember, you're not pushing your own views. You are looking at what's happening there, and you must write in this kind of, well, objective way, you know. So that was a very interesting thing for me. Objectivity.
This was a different time, but this is beautiful history. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I know because this was a difficult time, and there were pending orders also, because the Black Review edition that was edited by you, Mam Thoko, they had to sort of remove your name and have Mam Asha's name.
Yes.
Yeah, because you were banned while it was still with the printers, you know. Yeah, so, and other people, I'm sure other people, while they were writing also for the review, they would get banning orders. I was looking in the archives, a list of people who were banned. I mean, like, say from 72, I mean, it was as if you were getting banning orders, I don't know, almost every week or something like that.
Every time they thought you are likely to create problems. Banning order. Banning order. They were really churning them out, yes. So I did bring a copy of the one that belongs to Asha.
Yes.
She got it.
Yes.
And so we printed this at Lovedale Press. So where it says editor, you had to black out the editor, and then it became Asha Rambali.
Yes.
Asha Rambali.
Yes.
Yes. So this is hers.
Yes.
It had been edited by me, and so she got that one, and then the next one she did. I don't think they finished theirs. Then we were banned because in '77 whatever they did, the organizations, they took them.
Yeah, because also the first one, which was done by Steve Biko, he was banned, and then Ben Kwape, and then
Mafika,
and then
yes. So they just kept banning people. That's how we went, but we didn't stop.
I think with the one I was working on, we'd done quite a lot. In fact, there was Tami as well. Remember, he was working on 10 years of Black consciousness, and he had gotten quite some way in writing that book. And you know, it really pains me to think of all that work just being taken and not really knowing what happened to it. There are rumors that it's sitting in the libraries of some of, maybe at BITS or with some of our lawyers. I don't know.
But they say some of this stuff was literally burnt. They made bonfire out of some of those things. Yes. Another person we didn't mention is Ray Curry. Yes, Ray Curry.
Yes. And also, can you also maybe, now that we've spoken about publications and research, can we also talk about the clinic, the Zanempilo Clinic? I know you've mentioned some of the key people. Can you sort of describe some of the work that was happening there, the meetings, some of the work that was happening there at the clinic, and people that were coming there for meetings, the political work and the clinic work that was taking place there? Maybe we can start with you, Mam Thoko.
Zanempilo also, I mean, we had a board, Black Community Program had a board, chaired, in that board, I can't remember chaired whether it was Papa himself, but we had people like Nyembezi, we had people like, I don't know how Father Stubbs was in the picture, but he was always in the picture. And then we had Motlana, and then we had, honestly, I can't remember who were in the board, but so we would do the work and report to the board. And so the concept of Zanempilo emerged, I guess, in the discussions there. And they fundraised according to, because we were not involved in everything, but according to the narrative, they got very little money and went to a man called Flask to ask him to design a clinic. And his quotation was far above the money they had. And they said, make it happen with the money we have. And then they started fundraising. The clinic, again, was an effort to be in the community, to show that black people can actually be doctors and run clinics. And everybody there was black. And they did everything, and it was fully operational with the infrastructure, with ambulances, and Mbilini used to drive the ambulance, and so it was at Zinyoga. That's where they got the land, at Zinyoga, and members of the community also participate, were in the staff. They were not employed from outside, but we tried to get people from the community to work at the clinic. Some as nurses, others as assistants and whatever. It had a place for living quarters for doctors and nurses, and a hall, and then also rooms. But we also had meetings there as well. And strategic meetings, actually. Strategic meetings, like these meetings you would have here.
and celebrations,
And
Goombas.
and Goombas.
With the
Yes.
community.
Yeah.
That was really great.
Yeah.
An important part of the clinic was the mobile clinic, because it took health services to communities that were a distance away and would have found it difficult to actually come to Zinyoga. And they were getting top service from very dedicated people. And when you think about health services in our country today, that concept of an efficient health service with using mobile clinics would be a great thing. So black community programs, really went to the core. I think it did a sterling kind of analysis of what the needs of the people were, and it did that through various kinds of conversations with people, because by going into communities, you spoke with the people, you found out what they needed, and you provided it. So it was, in a sense, following that Paulo Freire process as well.
Maybe one we're talking about Zinyoga, because I believe the clinic is on church land, and most of the sites that were used by Black Community Programs or by the Black Consciousness are on church land. The office in Leopold Street, the office in Beatrice Street. Can you explain to us, that process? Why did you choose church land? Was it easy in those days, to maybe use church land? And also, while you tell us about that, can you also talk about the role of the Christian Institute and Bears No Day in Black community programs?
Do you want to go there? I'm not sure that I can.
Okay.
I'm really qualified to say. I know with the office in Beatrice Street, there was a very good relationship with, this very wonderful priest of the United Congregational Church, and I think in part that was because of. Sorry?
Lula?
Yeah, that's right.
BK
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a very good relationship between Ben and I think Steve and the Reverend. I did go to see him some time back. I'd say this is about 5 or 6 years back. But I'm not sure if he's alive anymore. And the church is still
amazing.
The church is, wow, that is amazing. So I must try and see him. But his nephew has passed on. But the church is being slowly broken down. And actually, the BCP and SASO offices are buried under a parking lot. It's sad. Actually, it's sad. It was a shock for me to discover that that parking lot had covered that, had covered that. It was like history really being buried under concrete. And, it's a pity. We should have done something about it. Yeah.
So there was that relationship in the United Congregational Church, because Ben Khwapa was also a member of the United Congregational Church, Beatrice. In the Eastern Cape, it was the Anglican Church. David Russell was responsible for that complex. So he had a small office there, and that church was not being used that much. Actually, it was not being used, so they gave it to Steve to use, because he was bent. He needed a space, so they really made it available. Boaz Nodie, I think Boaz Nodie was always there. I mean, was almost a partner, in my recollection, on fundraising, making sure that there is funding for the work that was being done without telling us what to do. So he was really, really a strong supporter of social justice issues and the things that we were doing. And so he was an intermediary, a very strong intermediary for fundraising. So, and then Father Alred Stab was also. And we did also have embassies that had people who really wanted the work to continue. Also, because their government had taken a stance against apartheid. So it was a way also of making sure that social justice is achieved.
Yes. Apologies for looking at my phone. I'm just checking if there are questions from YouTube. Okay. No, we don't have any questions for now. Can we also, thank you for the answers to these questions. Thank you very much. Can we also talk about Mwelela Trust Fund and the bursary in Ginsberg, and even maybe about the Ginsberg crèche? Yes, can you maybe summarize that part of the programs, of the Black community programs?
I think you're in a better
Okay.
Yes.
A project would start and then lead to other projects. One of the Mwelela Trust Fund was really intended to assist in development projects. But then it also veered towards assisting almost what they would call dependence conference, families of people in prison. So it also did that. So it was a trust established to do that. Now, I want to be honest, because I cannot remember the original source of that funding, because it also depended on where you get your anchor funding in order to then run a particular group, because there will be people who are interested in health, can fund you in health, in education. It started again as an effort to say, through education, we can use the method of Paulo Freire, we can develop leadership, and we are here in King Williamstown, and Ginsberg is where Steve is, and let's use Ginsberg as a center. But it did not just fund only Ginsberg children, it funded other children as well. There were also formation schools for them during holidays to make sure that it's not just about a bursary, but you are looking at this person holistically with a view to develop a well-rounded leader of the future, or a citizen, and a conscious person who's ready to take on life. So we had that, and then of course all those were banned. You said Zimele, Mwelela
Trust Fund.
Yes.
Yes, and I think we've responded to
Okay.
to all the questions.
Okay.
Yes, because it was the Mwelela Trust Fund and the Ginsberg crutch and
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Maybe also, if I know we did touch on Njwaka. What are some of the items that were produced there at Njwaka? I know we talk about those in the dossier, but maybe again for people who are watching, if you can tell us more about the items that were produced at Njwaka.
I'm laughing because there used to be a joke about leather bags. You remember the leather bag? The one in Alice, you remember?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
in Njwaka in Alice.
Yes.
There was something as well in Cape Town.
Yes. Yes.
So Mvovo had to work with the community to design this. You get leather, and then from the leather, people are trained into making bags so that those bags can be sold. So some of those bags were, in construction those days, everything was manual. So you put your hammer, you put your everything here, and then you just take it out and use it. So they were called leather bags. So every time he reported, he would start with leather bags. And we all knew that the first item on the agenda, leather bags. And we'd say, but there are other items. And then he'll remember that, oh, by the way, there are also clothes. And there's also beads.
Yes.
And all that was meant for people to learn to do things that they can sell themselves. Some actually in that community learned especially clothing, to make clothes and sell.
Not sure exactly where. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This question, can you sort of maybe, how will you describe the place of community development within the structure of Black consciousness movement?
How do we?
How will you describe the place of development within the structure of Black consciousness movement?
Do you want to begin and then I'll... I'm sorry, I'm passing on a lot to you.
Yeah, or maybe we can take a pause on Black community programs and go back to the role of arts and culture in spreading the message of Black consciousness, which is another project that we are working on, because we are looking at how Black consciousness, spread its message through theater, poetry, etc., etc. Maybe if you can, Ma'am Asha, if you can also talk about that, and also maybe if you can tell us. I know that you were very involved in theater and poetry in Durban, but when you were in King Williamstown, were you also doing that, or did you mainly focus on Black community programs when you were in King Williamstown?
No, when I was in King Williamstown, it was really getting to know the job, and when you think about the events of 1977, things happened very fast. I suppose eventually, we might have gotten down to that, but both Steve and Peter made that trip, and I think, that had terrible consequences, as we all know, but it did mean that, you literally saw Black community programs being dismantled right before your eyes. But, arts and culture, you must know Comrade Mpumlwana Bofelo. He's an exemplar today of how powerful poetry, music, etc., can be in conscientizing people, bringing people together, and creating a sense of purpose. So for me, the arts have always been the word, in different forms. You have the written word, books, then you have the spoken word, poetry, and you have the, what's it, painted wood, you know, painting, etc. And they all send powerful messages, and I think basically the arts and culture of our time was sending out the message that you are black, you are proud, you know, you should take charge of your destiny, you can take charge of your destiny, and promoting ideas of black solidarity, self-reliance. And I think that's also very pertinent today. And for me, someone like Comrade Bofelo today has, there are other artists, but he's the one I know best. He sort of exemplifies the spirit of those times, you know, what was said through arts and culture and theatre.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Just on some of the writers of the time, I saw in my children, Credo Mutua, where some of those people were just writing and bringing a narrative about it's okay to practice your cultural expression and belief system and so on. People like Mandla Langa wrote a lot, and he still writes now. Mandla is writing a lot. I think, didn't you have Nomsisi Cry as well, acting?
Yes,
yeah, Nomsisi was also.
A play.
Yeah, in
Well,
a play.
Like we said, that whole arts and culture movement, the theatre movement really spread because you had a lot of theatre in what should I say, Transvaal, Gauteng. It was known as the Transvaal then. There was the People's Experimental Theatre here. And those national festivals we had did bring groups from all over the country together. You know, so there was black talent and creativity. And what the Black Consciousness Movement was doing through arts and culture was bringing them all together in a kind of collective conversation to exchange ideas, not just around, you know, the mechanics of theatre, but the politics around theatre. I'm not sure whether we've spoken about this before, because in Durban we have the Time of the Writer Festival,
Yes.
and people think that that's something new, but in actual fact it happened years ago. You know, all these cultural activities at a national level, bringing people from all over the country, happened via the Black Consciousness Movement. And, you know, I think that first phase of the Black Consciousness Movement was too short. It was really taking off, and then suddenly Steve is murdered, the movement and all the organizations are banned. So that was really a terrible blow. It sort of cut all the kinds of activisms that were taking place then.
Yes. As we move towards the end, I said at the beginning that tomorrow is the 47th anniversary of the Viva Frelimo Morale, which led to the arrest and the BPC Sasso trial. Can we also maybe talk briefly about the organizing of the Viva Frelimo Morale, you know, and the subsequent, you know, events after it, you know, what the arrest, our friend Vino was detained, Vino Redi was detained after the rally. Can maybe Ma'am Asha?
Well, you know what?
Because in fact, I know that the Black Communist programs are founded in 72, and we've spoken about the Black Communist programs, and then there's the Viva Frelimo Morale in 74, and then there's the trial for 17 months, and then after the trial, and then there's, you know, 77, and then the banning of Black consciousness. But can you just take us? Can you first tell us about the rally and the subsequent events?
I think I've made it clear I've always been a kind of rank and file member, not one of the big voices at the top, which doesn't in any way minimize the role of rank and file people, because without them you'd get very little done. So I think the actual organizer, organizing and who the organizers were, that kind of information you will have to seek from other sources like maybe Sats Cooper and others. But I do know the word spread very rapidly that there were Frelimo speakers, Frelimo people coming down, and that we had to urge everybody to meet at Curry's Fountain. And we heard that 2 of our comrades had gone up to facilitate things. So I'm giving you all the hearsay. You might get a clearer idea about this from Vino. But in any event, the word did get around, and there was a massive crowd at Curry's Fountain. It was unbelievable. And if you were a shorty like me, you had to climb up the slope in the hope that you might see the Frelimo comrades when they came down, because, they were supposed to be talking to the crowd from some point at the bottom of the slope. So there we were, a huge crowd waiting. I'm not sure, you just heard people saying they're going to come soon, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about someone who's in the middle of this crowd and my experience of that rally. And I think we waited there quite long. It must have been close to about an hour or so. But that crowd was building up and building up. And then, of course, the police pitched up. You could hear dogs barking, you could hear the police shouting, and suddenly you could just feel this crowd surging, moving back up, moving up the slope. And if you were where I was, you were just taken along with the crowd. In fact, I fell onto the ground and just felt people walking over me. I had to put my head down on the ground with my arms, trying to protect myself. And when I looked up, it happened very fast, and you just saw people running all over the place, the police after them with, their batons in their hands, and the dogs, these Alsatians, chasing after people. So, yeah, I just sort of crawled up that slope. There was a school there, I think, and, it was getting quite dark too, and you just saw people sort of running all over the place. And I think I met up with some of the comrades later, but we were all sort of milling around the place looking for each other. And then you knew that some of the comrades had been picked up. And so the rest was, I think, trying to get home, finding out who was arrested, and talking to each other about what had happened. And whether the speakers, whether the Frelimo comrades really came there. Or I think for a long time, there was just this idea that maybe it was a hoax. But the idea was that, our own comrades would speak to us about Mozambique being independent and what it implied for this country. But from what I hear, 2 comrades did go. It didn't quite work out. I'm not quite sure why. But that's something that you should try and fathom. I'd be greatly happy, yes. And so would you be, yes. I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you like to add something, Ma?
No.
Okay.
Not on Frelimo, because
Yes.
I was in King Williamstown in
Yes.
the back office.
Sure.
So I was not
Sure.
in Durban.
Yes.
So all we knew was there was actually a conversation of, given that the crowd had become big, Should people disperse or not disperse? Because and also police had threatened that they were coming. As we are saying, actually, now that we are saying, we don't know whether the Frelimo people were going to come, whether they finally came or they were stopped somewhere, I don't know. But the issue was to talk about Mozambique.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sort of, pushing the struggle here, pushing it forward. Because Mozambique was independent, we should be independent as well, and I think just to garner support for that.
Yes.
It was a political act, I think, motivated by political ideas for taking the struggle forward. I think that there were also pro-Frelimo rallies in other parts of the country as well, because we did hear about, smaller ones, but people were arrested all over the country, and I think, in a sense, those rallies provided the system with a perfect excuse for, putting the Black consciousness movement on trial, because from that followed the trial, arrests.
Oh, thank you, Ma. My last two questions. I'll start with you, Mam Thoko. Is there something during this discussion that you think that we have not covered when it comes to Black community programs that you would like to say? And then I'll also ask you, Mam Asha, to also, if you think there's something that we didn't cover on Black community programs that you would like to, that we didn't cover during this discussion or in the dossier. Because the dossier that we've put together is for political education. It's for political schools. It is an introduction, but we are still planning to do more work. But I'll start with you, Ma.
I would like to say two things. The first one is the spirit in which solidarity and comradeship was displayed at the time. People were involved in the struggle, for the struggle, and for the service of others. Not for gain, and not for positions. And so we supported each other at all times and made sure that what we do for our community. So I'm putting that one. The other one we have not had an opportunity to talk about is the clinic in Adams Mission. Yes, that clinic was ready to operate, and then we were banned. They had finished building the clinic. Apparently it's still there, so a little more work might be put into that so that you can and see. Yes, we didn't talk about Black perspective. We didn't have time to talk about that. Other publications that were produced at the time. Yeah, viewpoints and so on.
Okay, and Ma, on Black community programs or the role of art within the Black consciousness movement.
Sorry?
On Black community programs and the role of art in the Black consciousness movement, if there's anything that you would like to say as we move towards closing.
I think there's a lot that I could say. So, I think I want to say that there's a lot that we haven't actually said about Black community programs. Thoko's mentioned some of the publications, but I think the dossier you've done is a good way of following up. For me, the great mystery is what happened to all our assets, and I've always wanted to have a conversation with Thoko, Moodley, and say, now let's sit together. We were all detained, we were all banned, we were deliberately scattered around the country, but maybe amongst us we can sort of see what's happened to all that library that was taken away, the assets, the scripts that we had prepared, I don't know whether it's too late for that, but and maybe we'll never get down to it. But what I'm saying is that I think the work you're doing is great because it does, it must pick up on a lot of things that we have not spoken about. Arts and culture, I think there's great scope for actually doing a publication on the Black theatre movement, specifically in Durban, because it seemed to have started there. Well, people speak about a Durban moment, because that's where the Black consciousness movement started and really moved the whole country. And then there were other organizations involved there. But arts and culture really caught on fast because, like I said, there was really a kind of great outpouring of writing from young Black people, all the poetry, all the opinion pieces, and there were some real opinion pieces, and there were very strong anti-Black consciousness opinions from people who just thought we were a bunch of reactionary, racist people. You had other political tendencies, and I remember in 1977, there's a very respected person, I'm not going to mention her name, but she wrote a terrible article about the Black consciousness movement, and I remember we had a workshop around that and, responded to that. So we were under attack. There were obvious people who would attack us, like the system, but there were also, within our community, people who were fighting against the system, but very anti-us. So that was another thing we had to contend with. But for me, the power of Black consciousness and Black community programs is the opportunity it gives to people to come together, to share ideas, to disagree, but in the end, to sort of decide on a way forward. And I think we need that to move past our differences. And I think the Black consciousness movement also helped to highlight other kinds of discrimination, even within the Black community, like gender discrimination, the urban-rural divide, a whole range of things. Today we speak more about them, but I think we need to have bigger conversations around all that, using the same methodologies, improved somewhat, as the Black community programs did.
Before I move to Mam Talk, your message to future generations and lessons that, I know you've been mentioning it during this discussion, some lessons that we can, take from the Black community programs and from the Black consciousness movement. But as your concluding remarks, a message for future generations and lessons that we can learn.
Well, I think each generation has to look at itself, at its environment, at what worries them, and must have the strength to criticize that which bothers them and have the courage to change that which bothers them. I think it's good to look at the past as well, because you do learn a lot from the past. I'm still reading books from the past. That would be my message. But I think, I do see history as cyclical. We basically have the same conditions of power and privilege, oppression, suppression, even within our own communities. And this is not just local, it's a global phenomenon. And for me, it's that building solidarity to challenge all that which tries to make people, less human. 'Cause the one thing about the Black consciousness movement, and you will find this echoed in many of Steve's pieces in I Write What I Like, talks about recovering your humanity or creating a human face, creating people who are truly human. remain. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, man. That is beautiful. Thank you. Mamto.
Why I like what is written there, if you do not write your history, history will write you off. I'm grateful for the opportunity that you have decided to focus on Black consciousness as a period that should never be written off history of South Africa. There was a time when there was threat of it being written off as having existed, as having impacted on where we are. The message to our generation now and going forward is that we took it from where it was, it is here now. It's up to you to take it even further. The purpose is to create a just, a fair society for all, where each person lives to their best ability. That's what we were all working towards. That Black people must not be made to feel they have no role in making this society what it is. They own the space. They should feel that they own the space. We should never think that once we believe we own the place, therefore the place is only for us. History, we live in a world that changes. We should be able to analyze where we are, what are the new challenges, and remember, whilst we may benefit, but it's more about coming generations, that we leave them with a better world.
Thank you. In fact, before we close, I want to read a poem written by your comrade Mafika Kwala, where he is also mentioning some of your comrades in a very nice way. A reminder. This is the title of the poem. A reminder. I know both of you know this poem very well, but I'll read it for future generations. A reminder for Mazani. Do you still remember Norman Mfoka Dubazane when you shouted, "Siyotiliza indaba nabonyana bomgijima," while stringing beans on the Isle of Makhanda, for us to say thank you, Sibongile, ngokwenza kwakhe okasenza ngakhona. Inhlanhla of the ancestors is on our side, making black tricks to keep us on, cause Uzwele Sizwe's black utterances did spit our tongue cleanse amateka disego. Thus for us to sing Bege Sizwe se Africa and to look at the face of the African Ilanga, saying we belong with Nkondo icilongo libhobhile, Zinjiva lezo nsizwa in deep snow winter, for inyameko isiyeqile, ibhokwe ngeyesiko lobuntu, phakama muntu omnyama, nhlapho kasekhukhuni, inyaniso seyiwelile, wozani mabandla onke nizolalela. Do you still remember Norman Mfoka Dubazane? Bantu bika kokhokho bethu that it does work, Vivan Makwedini. Yeah.
Remember Norman.
So just again to go back to the words that I opened with, where I was quoting my favorite poet and dramatist Ubabu H.I. Romo, when he was congratulating his friend, the poet Dr. Vilagazi, and he said, your efforts are your people's fame. And I'm today to the Black consciousness generation, to you, Mam Togo, and to you, Mam Asha, I'm saying your efforts are your efforts are your people's fame. To quote the words of Ubabu H.I. Dlomo, imizamo yenu idumo labantu bakini. Siyabonga kakhulu. Thank you very much. Siyabonga.